good evening. It is 7:01. I'd like to call the meeting of the Committee of the Whole to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Here.
Mr. Evans, Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Ms. Colasetti, Ms. Bishop,
Here.
Ms. Wilkin,
Here.
Mr. Quisenberry,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
All right. The first item on the agenda is approval of minutes of previous meetings. I don't believe we have any.
No.
Okay. Additions to the agenda this evening? Chandra?
I was wondering if we could move, what did you say? Oh, she said. Oh, never mind then.
Okay. All right. The first item on the agenda is, after additions to the agenda, is closed session. So I know that we have people in the audience tonight. Just so you know, if council approves moving into closed session, the order would be closed session. We would return after that, and then there would be an FOP negotiation background information, and then public input, so that you have an idea of the timing here. So I'll entertain a motion for a closed session for collective bargaining pursuant to 5 ILCS 120/2C2.
I so move.
Second.
Moved by James, seconded by Sharice. Do I need to do a roll call?
Yes.
Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
We will return after closed session, back into open session. All right, thank you for being patient with us. I'll entertain a motion to open session.
So moved.
Second. Moved by Chandra, seconded by Jaya. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans.
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Ms. Colasetti,
Yes.
Ms. Bishop,
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin,
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry.
Yes.
All right, next up on the agenda is FOP negotiation background information from Human Resources, and Elizabeth Hannon will be doing a presentation for us.
So I just wanted to go over a little bit of background information, and some of this I'll start fairly general and then get a little bit more specific. I also want to mention, so I don't forget later, that there is a presentation that's almost an hour long available on our website regarding the collective bargaining process generally, and we moved that up to the front page today in case anyone would like to see that. So the city has collective bargaining agreements with 3 unions: the International Association of Firefighters, the IAFF, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, AFSCME, and the Fraternal Order of Police, the FOP. So those contracts are negotiated by teams for the respective unions, which are made up of city employees, and sometimes they will have an outside attorney or a union agent who may or may not be an attorney. And then the city's team, which is made up of non-union management employees. It's always been the practice of this administration to meet with council in closed session before negotiating a new contract, and we do that to discuss strategy. During those closed session meetings, the team always discusses potential items that may be addressed in negotiations, possible items that will come up, possible proposals we expect from the union, and our target range as it relates to wage increases and other economic items. Those meetings occur in closed session in accordance with a long-standing exception in the Open Meetings Act. And that's because the legislature recognized that it would place a public body at a strategic disadvantage if we had to have those discussions about negotiation goals, strategies, and financial information in an open forum or in any context where union representatives would be able to have that information. So, as an example, if you're negotiating against somebody that knows exactly the limit of your authority, they don't have really any incentive to go any place other than exactly to the limit of your authority. This is similar to the idea that council can meet in closed session to discuss real estate transactions what the city might be willing to buy or sell a piece of property for, or pending litigation where the council needs to be able to speak candidly in conversations about legal strategies. So once those closed session conversations have occurred, the teams for this city and the union meet to negotiate the contract. During this administration's tenure, since the spring of 2017, the city's negotiated 3 AFSCME contracts, 3 IAFF contracts, and 3 FOP contracts, including the one that currently is before council. Similar to other union negotiations, including the current 2020 to 2023 FOP contract, the city team met with council in closed session to discuss acceptable parameters for negotiations prior to the start of negotiations. So there are a couple of things that were different here. And those are that the city and the union agreed to limit the scope of negotiations in advance. We agreed to try to complete negotiations in 1 day, and we limited the size of the negotiating teams. So partly that's because we recognize that we want to be good partners for our FOP employees and facilitate a more productive dialogue in the hope of accomplishing good things together. That may have had the unintended consequence of seeming like this was a surprise, because it came up quickly and it came up ahead of what would be the normal schedule, but I assure you that was not anybody's intention. In terms of the FOP agreement that's currently before council, on September 6th and September 26th, 2022, council was in closed session with staff to discuss strategy for negotiations for a total of several hours. After the second closed session, the city's team met with the union on November 4th and negotiated a contract with the FOP under the direction and consistent with the authority provided by the city council. So the contract that's before council is consistent with the authority and the direction that was given to staff by council in the closed session.
All right, any questions for Elizabeth? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Elizabeth, appreciate it. We'll move on to public participation. If you would like to speak, please come up to the microphone and state your name for the record. And you will be given 5 minutes. I apologize, our clerk isn't here, but I will keep time.
Hello, my name is Derek Briles. I'm a resident of Urbana Ward 4, and I'm here again 3 meetings in a row to urge you to, again, please do not approve this contract. Thank you very much for that presentation. It is very helpful. The information is very nice to have. But while I admire your congeniality to your police force, it would be nice if you would show that same congeniality to your public, particularly the public that voted you into these offices. I didn't vote for these cops. I didn't vote for their contract. I voted for you, and I voted for people who ran on defunding the police. So agreeing to a single-day bargaining session and agreeing to limit the topics of bargaining ahead of time, these do not sound like the moves of someone interested in reimagining what public safety looks like. Does not look like someone that is trying to bring in a greater community involvement. It certainly is not the actions of someone interested in defunding the police. I think that is a huge letdown and honestly a smack in the face to the people that you're supposed to be representing. I mean, I've said it before, you've heard me say it before, a one-day bargaining session is absolutely laughable. Have you never been in another bargaining session? Do you not know what this is like? Have you been in a union before? I mean, you can just look on campus. The grad student union's been bargaining their contract for 6 months now, and they've not reached an agreement because that's what it's like, right? When you actually have something invested and you're looking out for the people's best interest that you represent, it doesn't happen in a day. I mean, does that not do you not feel bad? Do you not feel regret about that? Do you not think that you could do something better? And do you not, I don't know if we have any representatives of the police here. They don't seem to ever bother to show their faces in the building that they work in. But you would think they would be in their best interest to look like they actually care about the people that they're supposed to be serving and protecting. But they're not here. They're not presenting any information about why any of this happened, why they get $900,000 in raises when they already start at $68,000 a year for not even having a degree. My God, I've worked in the public sector for 16 years. I tell you what, I had to have a master's degree, and I didn't start out at $68,000 a year. But they got $900,000 in raises after you all just approved $1.3 million in bonuses. I'm a public employee. Why am I not getting bonuses and raises? I don't shoot people. I don't carry around guns, right? I don't understand the drive behind any of this. I don't understand any of it. But I know you've got 6 months before this contract has to be approved, and I know that the rank and file's already approved it. But my God, why not try to put some pressure on the police to say, hey, this might be in your best interest to look like you give a shit about people. It's right there on their website, the mission statement of the UPD, that they would be collaborative with the community. This is not. Where are they? They're not collaborative. They're not cooperative. They don't care. All they want is impunity to do whatever they want with no consequences and more money for doing it. I mean, who doesn't want that? But you know what? None of the rest of us are out there carrying guns. None of the rest of us have that authority over people's lives to ruin people's lives, disrupt people's lives the way the police do. I'm not here. I'm not elected to do this. I'm here every single time I can be here and telling you everything I can to get you to do something. But take the risk, say no to this contract, and let's put some pressure on the police to bring them back to the bargaining table to realize it's in their best interest too. They're part of this community, even if they don't live here, because we know they don't, because you've eased the restrictions on the residency requirements in addition to giving them more money. But they're still part of this community, and it's in their best interest to work collaboratively with us as part of this community. Thanks.
Is there anyone else who wishes to address the committee of the whole? Please state your name for the record.
I'm Justin Mansfield. I also live in Urbana, Ward 2. Without an oversight committee that has full and explicit power to hold police accountable, you increase the risk of reckless behavior by the police going unaddressed in a proper manner, reckless behavior being condoned, and reckless behavior becoming normalized. This increases the risk of particularly brutal acts of police violence. This contributes to distrust of the police along with civil unrest, sharply so if a particularly brutal act of police violence were to happen here in Urbana. Instead of contributing to an ever-increasing police budget, instead of surveillance, containment, and punishment, we ought to use that money to improve the living conditions of people. We ought to use it for education, professional development, and housing. This is especially important given recent occurrences of police violence that you've heard about in the news, along with an increase of people killed by the police across the country in recent years. Approval of this contract endangers the public. As a side note, it would be comically grim, a sort of cruel joke, to potentially approve this contract so soon after Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I'm asking y'all to vote no on this contract.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else who wishes to address the committee of the whole? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the, oh, I'm sorry.
And we also have quite a few emails to read also.
Oh, thank you. Can you please state your name for the record?
Eldris Melinda Carr, and I'm Ward 3 in Urbana.
Would you mind
Can you hear
getting
me?
a little bit closer to the microphone?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, testing. I'm going to give a few comments about the FOB, the Fraternal Order for Police contract, and I'm talking as a resident, although I'm a member of the Minister Alliance, and we were preparing something, but I just want to make some comments about this topic and the agreement that's important to what's going on now in our community. One thing is, if we look back at the city and the city's hiring process, you do have a process for fair hiring when it comes to felonies, people with felonies and who are convicted of a felony. And I was just going to the website where it says the city supports second chance employment. Having a criminal record will not automatically disqualify applicants from consideration for city jobs. We strongly encourage all applicants who are interested in and qualified for city jobs to apply. Most of our positions do not require a criminal background check. If the job doesn't require it, we won't ask about it. If a job does require a background check to be conducted, you can be assured that we will keep you informed of your rights and protections as a job applicant throughout the hiring process. If you have a criminal record, we will conduct an individualized review of your circumstances and consider your entire situation, not just your conviction. So this is under the Equal Employment Opportunity, prior arrest or conviction record. Now, if we're looking at what we're looking at today, this FOB contract, why there's inconsistency with the practice of the city, because the Fraternal Order of Police deal with the public every day. People are just saying that it can't be business as usual. You have to have input from the public, because we deal with them, we engage with them every day, and we call them. We want them to help us and protect us and serve us. So the question is regarding when you have people who have felony convictions, you say you're going to hire them. We are part of the city. We say we're going to hire people who have a felony conviction. That's been changed. So if we look at, and I'm talking about the time, we just had a peace walk. I walked at King Park. I went around. So that's part of the effort to say we want to remember Dr. King. What we're doing today is part of the same effort. So we have to look at, I printed this out a week ago on Saturday. This is Dr. King. He was arrested multiple times. If today, would he be able to serve on this board? January 26, 1956, he was arrested in Montgomery, Alabama as part of a Get Tough campaign to intimidate the bus boycotters. 4 days later, on January 30th, his home was bombed. March 22nd, 1956, King, Rosa Parks, and more than 100 others were arrested on charges of organizing the Montgomery bus boycott in protest of Parks' treatment.
Ms. Carr.
Go down to 19, am I done?
Carr, I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay, enough said, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else? Please state your name for the record.
Yes, I'm Minnie Pearson, president of the NAACP Champaign County branch, and I stand before you right now because of the 10 shared principles. After looking at the contract, hearing about the contract, the limited number of the amount of knowledge that we have about the contract, I want to make sure that special attention is brought because this body, Urbana, signed the 10 shared principles, 4 and 5, and we are about holding the police accountable for their actions. We worked on reworking everything over the last 2 years, and we made some, quite some good steps. And we want to make sure that our Citizens Review Board, none of the power is taken away from that board. We want to make sure that our police officers are held accountable for their actions, and the wording and respect and building trust, we want to see that move forward. So I'm not quite sure of how this contract is working, But I want to make sure that you all pay close attention to that because it's important. And I'm holding you accountable for the things that you sign and the things that you do. So I'm waiting to see. And also with our Citizens Review Board, people are counting on that board to not be diminished in any shape, form, or fashion. And they shouldn't. So those are my concerns. And working with the ACLU, we are keeping a close eye on what is going on. So thank you.
Thank you for your input. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak? All right, if are our letters that need to be read, Chandra?
I have one from Chris Storr to the entire city council. Honorable Urbana City Council members, mayor, and staff. The American Rescue Plan Act funds are a rare infusion of discretionary funds not normally available to state, county, and local governments. Champaign County has distributed most of the 2 tranches of funds, but is awaiting the Urbana City Council distribution before deciding on providing funds for the Urbana Park District Health and Wellness Center. I encourage the Urbana City Council to use the rare ARPA grant to fund a large project, Urbana Park District Health and Wellness Center, which will serve the municipality long into the future. Please consider funding the Wellness Center along East Washington Street for at least $1 million or more. The UPD has served Urbana for more than 116 years, providing recreation, activities, and education that are a foundation of the entire community. The Urbana Park District has raised over $10 million, but is working to meet a $3.5 million gap for construction. The need for physical facility in East Urbana. The East Washington Learman area has a modest all-weather recreation facility to serve a large population. The gymnasium at Brookins Center is heavily used but provides limited programming for youth. Some demographic and income information are of particular consideration. Urbana has a higher family poverty rate at 11.8% than both the state of Illinois and the county at large. Within the Learman, Prairie Green, Rainbow View neighborhoods and the adjoining unincorporated Scottswood neighborhood have high concentrations of low-income, minority, underserved families in a high police crime area. Only about 30% of people in Learman neighborhood south of the Health and Wellness Center identify as non-Hispanic white, which is much lower than Urbana as a whole. The Learman neighborhood has about 40% of households led by single parents. Age distribution is very unique in that area, with both the highest concentration of those under 18 and over 65 in the adjacent neighborhoods. The Learman neighborhood has seen the most violent crime since 2010, over 750. The Learman neighborhood also ranks higher on the Social Vulnerability Index, which is a measurement created by the CDC to prioritize resources in the event of a disaster. RPC created a similar index, and the Learman neighborhood is considered one of the most vulnerable in Urbana. The UPD has formed a coalition of local organizations which are known for diverse programs promoting personal achievement and social development for youth and mental behavioral health. The list of cooperators is growing. The Forest Preserve District of Champaign County has informally expressed interest in cooperating with the Urbana Park District to support those in unincorporated Champaign County. In summary, the use of the ARPA funds for the Health and Wellness Center will provide an amenity in a neglected area sorely in need of community center. Respectfully submitted, Chris Storr.
All right, are there other letters that need to be read? Sharice?
One from, and I just had it, Alan Axelrod. Procedural complaints regarding the Fraternal Order of Police contract that is not backed up with collective action from the lamenting alderpersons are, if we are to assume good faith failing their constituents. You are allowed to advocate, but it will cost you the carrots offered to you in excess politics. You cannot balance both, and you have had years to decide in the public view. Tonight is yet another such decision in the public view. Will you petition legislators to address forced arbitration's coercive nature in the Fraternal Order of Police contract bargaining process so that you can dig your heels in and fight for what you say you believe, or will you allow this to pass with but the limpest of lip service? If you choose the former, you will find organized community support. If you choose the latter, your credibility, in our view, will continue to erode. Either way, good luck to you and take care.
Grace, you had one?
Yeah, I think they were sent to all of us. Yeah, and then a few others also. I can reading. I was hoping to not do it, but I will. Sure, yeah, if you want to.
All right. Okay. I am a PhD student at the University of Illinois and a resident of Champaign-Urbana, and I am concerned about the new Fraternal Order of Police union contract for 2023 to 2026 being brought before the Urbana City Council on January 17th. Please read my comment out loud during this meeting. I urge all council members to vote against the hastily negotiated Fraternal Order of Police contract for 2023 to 2026. This contract fails to address critical issues including the use of force, excessive force, witness coercion, de-escalation, and civilian oversight. Given the ongoing issues with law enforcement locally and nationally, it is unacceptable to pass a contract that fails to address the safety issues that an unchecked police force can present to our community. Equally unacceptable are the deceptive negotiation tactics used by the FOP to push this through 6 months early without any transparency or respect for the democratic process. As a concerned member of the Urbana community, I ask that you vote no on this resolution. Signed, Alex, no last name given. Another letter. Dear City Council members, please read my comment out loud during the council meeting. I urge you to vote against the hastily negotiated Fraternal Order of Police contract for 2023. The deceptive negotiation tactics used by the FOP to push their contract through 6 months early make it clear that this contract doesn't put public safety first. This contract puts the interests of the FOP ahead of public safety and shows blatant disregard for the democratic process. I ask that you not only vote no on this resolution, but also put a plan in place for changing the negotiating process with the FOP as soon as possible. A longer negotiation period, a process for taking and implementing public comment on negotiations, and the involvement of the Civilian Police Review Board are necessary for making future FOP contracts match the needs of the Urbana public. Sincerely, Leslie Owens. Another letter. I urge all council members to vote against the hastily negotiated Fraternal Order of Police contract for 2023-2026. This contract fails to address critical, actually this is a letter this letter repeats what I just already read, but it was submitted by Matt Soylent. Next letter. My name is Carol Inskeep, and I am a longtime resident of Urbana's 5th Ward. First, a quick thanks to all of you for serving in city government. I really appreciate your work and your efforts. I'm writing out of concern about the current contract negotiations with the police department. The more I learn, the more uneasy I've become about the process and the agreement itself. A few quick points. 1, there needs to be a truly transparent process with true community involvement when it comes to negotiations around police accountability. We need the council to push for a better process. I hope the Civilian Police Review Board will be strengthened, allowing the board to require police to appear, allowing those with felony convictions to be eligible to serve on the board, and allowing the public more access to information about investigations is important. I have had many opportunities to see Urbana police responding to incidents in our community. I have really appreciated whenever I have seen them make efforts to de-escalate, to treat people with respect, and to show sensitivity towards those with mental health challenges. I want our city to keep having labor contracts and a civilian review board that reinforce those standards. Thank you for listening to my comments. Carol Inskeep, last letter. I'm a 30-year resident of Urbana, and I generally feel positive about the Urbana city government. But lately, I have learned about the sensitive nature of the contract bargaining with the Urbana Police Department and a lack of meaningful accountability for police misconduct in the tentative contract. This is really disappointing to me. I generally have a positive view of the Urbana Police Department and have seen them act in ways that are professional and non-confrontational. I think the contract should build on this and make it clear that any violations of professional and ethical behavior will be strictly dealt with. I'm not sure why the contract was negotiated without participation of our elected council members, or why there are no clear and enforceable measures against police misbehavior in the contract. But I do not want this to happen again. I would ask council members to raise the issues of the rushed and secretive negotiation process, the lack of actionable accountability measures, and the weakness of the Civilian Police Review Board. And if it is possible to vote no on this resolution, do so. If labor law does not allow a no vote, then please vote under protest and make sure that rules are changed so that in future negotiations with the FOP, this does not happen again. Thank you, Matthew Murray.
All right, are there any other letters to be read this evening? Nope, okay. Moving on to staff report. Are there staff reports this evening?
I just have a really quick reminder to folks. I want to thank everybody who came to the open house that we had last Thursday about the fire stations and gave input. There's still an opportunity to do that if you would like. The slides are posted on our website. There's a click through on the homepage, and comments will be taken through next Monday, January 23rd. Thank you.
All right, under new business, we have resolution number 2023-01001, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement for the Cunningham Township Supervisor's Office, Bridge to Home. I'm going to read all of these resolutions because I believe Rodan is going to present all of them at the same time. The second resolution is number 2023-01002, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement with Champaign Healthcare Consumers Special Population Case Management Program. And the third one is resolution number 2023-01003, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement for Champaign County Regional Planning Commission Housing Navigation Program. And the last one, number 4, is resolution number 2023-01004, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement for CU at Home Housing Navigation Program. Great.
Thank you. So I did provide a presentation last week, just an overview of these 4 proposals that we received as part of the Housing and Homeless Innovations Grant Program to support housing and homeless services and programming in the community. So we have the agreements before you tonight for a vote of approval. So in attachment 1 of your packet, you'll see the funding breakdown, and then in attachment 2 of the memo, you will see more information is provided about each program that we are proposing to fund through this program. So on the second page of your memo, you can see there's a chart with the different funding sources that were all put into this one pot of money for the Housing and Homeless Innovations Grant Program. Again, as I mentioned last week, this was a collaborative effort between the City of Urbana and City of Champaign. So you see the total funding available was just over $5.3 million. $2.6 million was provided through the Urbana Home ARP program. $285,000 came out of the Urbana Home allocation, and then Champaign CDBG made up $175,000, and Champaign General Funds came to $2.2 million. So I will just quickly go through each of the programs that we are proposing to fund. Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, their Housing Navigation and Stabilization Program in the amount of $148,224. Champaign County Healthcare Consumers Special Populations Case Management, funding recommendation $298,850. Cunningham Township Supervisor's Office Bridge to Home Program in the amount of $375,000, and then See You at Home Housing Navigation Program at $120,000. So those are the programs that Urbana is proposing to fund. There was a request at last week's meeting for information on the programs that Champaign is funding with their portion of the funds. So I'll go over those just briefly for your information tonight. I'll preface this by saying that all of the Champaign numbers are very tentative. Champaign staff are in the process of negotiating their contracts and going through that contracting process, and all of these will be subject to approval by the Champaign City Council. So none of these numbers are final. This is just where they are currently in terms of what they're looking to fund. So the funding total that Champaign is looking at right now for the HHI program is $198,665. They are proposing a contract with Cunningham Township in the amount of $40,000 to pay for a street outreach vehicle. They are proposing an agreement of $136,548 with the Regional Planning Commission for their landlord risk mitigation program. See You at Home, $260,000 for the expansion of their mid-barrier shelter program. $210,787 with the City of Champaign Township Strides Shelter for safety improvements to the newly acquired 70 East Washington location. $500,000 with the Housing Authority of Champaign County for the renovation of the Maple Grove. And lastly, an agreement with Habitat for Humanity in the amount of $150,000 for Habitat home builds within the City of Champaign. So tonight, staff is asking that the Committee of the Whole forward Urbana's agreements to the consent agenda with a recommendation for approval, and I'm happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Questions? Chandra?
I'm curious as to the difference between the two navigation programs that we're funding, the RPC one and the See You at Home. I know you sort of touched on this last week about the centralized intake. Was that last week or in our 2x2? The centralized intake, would both entities be using that software program?
Yes, both would. The difference is kind of the target population. So See You at Home's program is specifically focusing on clients that are currently enrolled in their programming with a focus on job training and then kind of life skills programming. So in that sense, it's similar, but the target populations are different. So that's why we're proposing to fund both of them, because that housing navigation we've seen in the community is really important to ensure that once someone gets into a housing program, they're able to stay stable in that program and then kind of move on to the next step. So different agencies have different approaches or maybe different target populations, but they all essentially have that goal of just making sure that people who are enrolled in their program are successful and can get to that next level.
So both navigation programs would have someone follow up with them, I guess, after they have gotten stable housing. There's still some case managing after they've say, moved out of the shelter or found more stable housing?
Yeah, the idea is that you have case managers to really focus on, again, those kind of life skill building programs, and then maintain that relationship so that they are able to retain stability in a program.
Okay, just making sure we aren't duplicating things. Thank you.
Other questions? Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and all that information. Do you have handy the total amount of Champaign contracts that you read off? Were those written in here? I didn't write them all down.
So I do. That's what I kind of ran through quickly. So the tentative total as of right now is $898,665.
Thank you. You said 898,000-ish.
Yes. Yep.
We'll just chop it off after thousands. And then if you could just confirm that the remaining money in this pot will be allocated later and mostly for housing development projects. This was the navigation kind of first round, and then more development projects will be considered for some of the remaining funds. Is that right?
Development projects are a possibility. I mean, it won't be restricted to that. Again, the focus is homelessness and affordable housing. So, you know, a lot of different things can fall under that umbrella. In terms, if you look back in your memo, the amount, the home ARP funding, a lot of that, there is a portion of that funding that remains that is for supportive service programs. So that wouldn't necessarily be development. That could be various types of programs to help individuals who have experienced homeless or individuals who are low income and need affordable housing assistance. So there's a variety of options. It's not just going to be one or the other, but we have been working with Champaign, and we are committed to continue to work together with this balance to make sure that it will go to housing, homeless assistance, things of that nature, if that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And then last piece, this might not be the place for it, so feel free to say that's part of another discussion, which we will also have. But we also asked about how this fits in with ARPA stuff, and I appreciate the information we got on that. And it looks like a lot of these are for separate proposals than people put in for ARPA, but there's maybe one that is the same. Do you have anything to speak on that, or shall we leave that in a separate ARPA discussion?
I have it here, but I do think that there's very little overlap. I believe there was only one program that had some overlap. Typically what we saw is that, you know, maybe one agency would apply for two separate programs. So they would apply with one program to the HHI and then another program for ARPA. We saw a lot of that. I don't think, I mean, we tried very intentionally to be aware of that. So I believe you have that information. And I think they could discuss that later in more detail. I apologize, I don't have too much specific information on that.
That's okay. I was trying to think too. I was like, what's actually my question here? So
Yeah,
anyway,
no.
You did great. Thank you. That's all.
All right, other questions? Grace?
I'd like to make a motion, actually.
Before you make a motion, can I make a suggestion to council? So we have four resolutions?
Yeah, I wanted to make it an omnibus.
Okay, all right, go for it.
That was the
That was,
Yeah.
that, I understood that was gonna be your suggestion. I'd like to, make omnibus with resolution number 2023-01-001, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement at Cunningham Township Supervisor's Office, Bridge to Home, Home ARP FY 2021-2022, with resolution number 2023-01002, resolution approving and authorizing the execution of Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement, Champaign County Healthcare Consumers Special Populations Case Management Program, Home ARP FY 2021-2022, resolution number 2023-001-003, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement, Champaign County Regional Planning Commission, Housing Navigation Program, Home ARP FY 2021-2022, and resolution number 2023-01004, a resolution approving and authorizing the execution of an Urbana Home Consortium subrecipient agreement, CU at Home, Housing Navigation Program, Home ARP FY 2021-2022. I'd like to combine all of those into one omnibus, and move for approval under consent agenda to City Council.
Are those two motions that are needed, clerk, or is it one?
You need a
Can I
second
do all
for the
those or do I
omnibus.
do it separate?
You can do it that way. That is not a problem to do it like that, because you're reading it as an omnibus vote to go to council on the consent agenda, so that's fine.
Okay, so we don't need a vote to make it omnibus first?
No.
Okay, all
I'll
right.
second.
All right, moved by Sharice and seconded by Chandra. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that moves on to City Council. Thank you very much. Next up on the agenda is Resolution Number 2023-01005, a resolution not to protest a proposed text amendment to the Champaign County zoning ordinance, one of our favorite things to talk about. Marcus?
Good evening,
you
Committee
doing
of the Whole.
presentation
How
for
are you
us?
doing today?
Somebody I see from the county as well?
Yes.
All right.
Mr. Hall is here, the Director of the Champaign County Department of Planning and Zoning, who will answer all the hard questions. So I will say thank you very much for your patience on this case. It's complex. We're actually talking about multiple uses in this zoning text amendment. The Champaign County Zoning Administrator requests a text amendment to the Champaign County zoning ordinance to make several changes to the table of authorized principal uses to allow for expanded materials management and other waste-related uses. The various uses would be permitted by right and/or with an administrative special use permit in the Ag 1 and 2, Business 1, 4, and 5, and Industrial 1 and/or 2 county zoning districts, and we'll go through each of these uses. As you know, the city has subdivision and land development jurisdiction within the extraterritorial jurisdiction, while the county holds zoning jurisdiction in this area. The city has the right to protest county text amendments by filing a protest by the date the case goes before the board. Under state law, a municipal protest of the proposed amendment would require then a 3/4 supermajority of affirmative votes for approval of the request at the county board. Otherwise, a simple majority would be required. At its January 5th meeting, the Plan Commission held a public hearing on this case. No members of the public spoke regarding the case. The Plan Commission voted unanimously with 4 ayes and 0 nays to recommend that City Council not protest the proposed text amendment. And staff requests that this case be placed on the City Council consent agenda. The Champaign County Department of Planning and Zoning has an applicant interested in establishing a facility that would collect large quantities of used glass inside a storage building to be transferred later to another location for processing. This type of use does not closely match any of the existing uses in the Champaign County zoning ordinance, and the county has not updated this category of uses since 1996. The Champaign County Environmental Land Use Committee of the Champaign County Board held its second meeting on this subject on January 5th and continued the discussion to its February 9th meeting. The earliest the case would be heard by the county board would be at its February 23rd meeting. The staff report summarized the proposed text amendment, looking at the preliminary and 2 supplemental memos issued by the zoning administrator. The full final finding of fact and final determination can be found in Exhibit B, Supplemental Memo 2. Table 1 in the staff report summarizes the new, revised, and deleted uses, and I'd be happy to go into more detail about these if you have questions. Proposed changes to the table of uses are summarized in Table 2, with additions shown in underlined bold. Existing uses that don't change are just in regular type.
The proposed amendment would add several uses that are currently not listed in Section 5.2 of the Table of Authorized Principal Uses in the County Zoning Ordinance. It would also clarify or split 3 current uses into 5 uses. This would allow the county to better regulate proposed uses for which they have received requests and to better regulate.
Can you hold on for a second, Marcus?
Sure.
Oh, yeah, I was trying to figure out if you were showing us something or if we were just going to
Oh,
see
dear.
this.
Well,
Nice.
fortunately, I haven't moved on to any other slides yet.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Okay, and to better regulate other current uses. Finally, it would rename one current use. That would be the one that would then be renamed into pollution control facility. And then establish a local siting approval review and public hearing process for it, and then remove it from the table of uses to turn regulatory authority of that use over to the Illinois EPA. For definitions of each of these proposed uses, you can see the full amendment in Exhibit B, Supplemental Memo 2. DPZ staff did note in the finding of fact that the proposed text amendment will help achieve the county's land resource management plan, goal number 4 and number 7, that the proposed amendment would not impede achievement of LRMP goals 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 8, and 9, and that it is not relevant to LRMP goal number 10. Overall, DPZ staff found that the proposed text amendment would improve the county zoning ordinance itself because it would help achieve the purposes of the ordinance as it is consistent with 9 of the ordinance's purposes, is not directly related to 9 of its purposes, and is inconsistent with none of the ordinance's purposes. It would also improve the text of the county zoning ordinance. The finding of fact goes to great lengths to explain how waste-related uses align with the LRMP goals. City staff analyzed it for its impacts on city zoning. We reviewed the proposed text amendment to identify potential land use conflicts within the city and its ETJ, and for potential impacts to the city's ability to plan or manage future development. Staff find that the amendment would minimize land use incompatibilities and would still allow the city to plan and manage development through the county's special use permit process. The staff report included findings of the most likely areas of compatibility and conflict based on comparisons of both jurisdiction zoning maps and effects on the city's ability to manage growth and development in the ETJ. Table 3 in the staff report summarizes the comparison. So then the staff report goes through each of the many uses and shows where the proposed areas that they would be permitted in the county align next to areas in the city and where the city allows those. Rather than reading you the staff report, I will show you the pictures. So this is Exhibit D, proposed junkyard districts. The city permits junkyards as a special use, if a special use permit is granted, in the purple hatched areas. The county would allow them only as a special use in the IN2, sorry, let me back up here, I will read. The county proposes to continue to permit junkyards in the I2 district. That's the solid green area. They're already permitted in this district, and they're planning to continue to permit them in that district. The city allows junkyards only as a special use in the IN2 purple hatched area. So this was mainly a change in naming. And I'll let Mr. Hall answer any specific questions. Moving on to recycling centers with or without outdoor operations. That's actually 2 different uses. The county proposes to continue to permit recycling centers with no outdoor operations in the B4 general business, B5 central business, I1, and I2 districts. So there's no change to this use, nothing for you to consider, other than its relationship to a new use, which is recycling center with outdoor operations, so storing materials outside. The county now proposes to permit recycling centers with outdoor operations in the I-1 and I-2 districts. That would be the purple solid areas. And as a special use in the B4 and B5 districts. Those are the green hatched areas, which you see along here, along Cunningham Avenue, which is along our commercial corridor. There are also some permitted areas of industrial zoning of county land that's within the matrix of the city. The city permits recycling centers only as a special use in the IN1 and IN2 districts, but not in the equivalent B3 general or B4 central business districts. So that would be these purple hatched areas. Somebody would apply to the city to put in a recycling center and have to get a special use permit for it. The city would be notified of any proposed recycling centers in its ETJ within the county's B4 zoning district and would be able to submit comments of support or concern to the Champaign County Zoning Board of Appeals, to the ELUC, and to the county board as part of the county's special use permit process. You'll hear me say that several times as we go through all of these uses. So moving on to the third use, construction and demolition debris recycling facilities. The county proposes, this is a new use, the county proposes to permit these facilities in the I-1 and I-2 districts as a special use. The city treats these facilities as a recycling center and permits them in the same zoning districts with a special use permit, so pretty similar. The county, though, would also require any proposed facility to be located on a minimum 5-acre lot at least 1,320 feet from any residential zoning district or conforming dwelling. So they've put some specific conditions on where a use like this would be allowed to be sited. So again, the city would be notified of any proposed CDD recycling facility in its ETJ and would be able to submit comments of support or concern to those county boards. Moving on to landscape waste processing facility. The county proposes to continue to allow a current use of landscape waste processing facilities as a special use in the Ag 2 and I-2 districts. So the Ag 2 districts are, the two permitted districts are lumped in here together in the green hatched area. They are not permitted by right in any district. That is the existing use. Looking at the exhibit now, this is for proposed landscape waste composting facilities as opposed to processing facilities. There's a fine difference. The county now proposes to permit composting facilities as a special use in the Ag 2, I-1, and I-2 zoning districts. The city would treat either of these uses, either processing or composting facilities, as a recycling center, like our current landscape recycling center, and allow them as a special use in the I-1 and I-2 districts. The city would be notified of any proposed facilities in its ETJ and would be able to submit comments of support or concern to the county ZBA, ELUC, and county board. Moving on to the proposed permanent compostable waste collection point districts. The county proposes to allow this new use as a special use in the Ag 2, B1, B4, B5, I1, and I2 districts. Only as a special use. These would be the hatched green areas. The city does not have a similar use, but would likely treat a proposed development as a recycling center and allow it as a special use in the I1 and I2 districts. These are the purple hatched areas within the city limits. Again, the city would be notified of any proposed collection point in its ETJ and would be able to submit comments of support or concern to the county agencies. All of these uses are summarized in Table 3, comparing the county and the city. Moving on to specific material collection sites. This would be the use classification for the proposed used glass collection facility. Specific material being the recycled glass, the collection site meaning where things would be dropped off, collected, and then transferred to another site for processing. The county proposes to allow these sites as special uses in the Ag 1, Ag 2, B1, B4, B5, I1, and I2 districts. Similar to the proposed collection point, the city does not have a similar listed use and would treat such a proposed development as a recycling center and allow it as a special use in the I1 and I2 districts. However, the proposed use would only be permitted as a second principal use on a property with an existing governmental facility, which again greatly restricts site locations. For example, the proposed glass collection facility is proposed to be located at a township facility. The city, again, would be notified of any proposed facilities in its ETJ for special use permit applications and would be able to submit comments of support or concern. So that is the end of the districts and the uses. The Urbana Plan Commission discussed the proposed text amendment at its January 5th meeting, clarified that the city does not have the authority to protest a special use permit, but it does have the authority to submit comments regarding such a permit. The commission voted unanimously with 4 ayes and no nays to recommend that City Council not protest the proposed text amendment. As for implications for development within the city's ETJ, staff feel that the proposed amendment would still allow the city to plan and manage development. Those uses not requiring a special use permit are often similar to uses already permitted or allowed by the city in similar zoning districts. Any proposed use requiring a county special use permit would require the county to notify the city of the application and to allow the city to submit comments of support or concern. As for the aligning with the comprehensive plan, the proposed county zoning ordinance text amendment is generally consistent with the city goals and objectives specified in the staff report, which are ensuring that new land uses are compatible, establish logical locations for land use types, and minimize incompatible interfaces using development and design controls. City Council has the following options in this case: not to protest contingent on specific provisions to be identified, or to protest. Again, on January 5th, Plan Commission voted unanimously to forward this case to City Council with a recommendation not to protest the proposed amendment. Staff concur with this recommendation and request the case be placed on the consent agenda. Mr. Hall is here to answer questions, as am I. Thank you.
Sorry about that. Questions for Marcus? Yes, James.
Yeah, thank you for that extensive presentation. I have a question about the table. It's called Table Number 2, Proposed Changes to Table of Uses, Zoning Districts, which has the districts, and then it has either Ps or Ss in that table. Can you clarify what the P and what the S stands for?
Yes, P stands for permitted by right, so administratively handled. There are no additional permits required other than the standard zoning permits. The S refers to it requiring a administrative special use permit. So it is, again, handled by staff. There are typically specific conditions and other processes that it goes through, but it does not get reviewed and approved by the county board. And I will leave any clarifications or corrections on that to Mr. Hall.
No, thank you. That confirmed what I suspected.
Okay.
All right, other questions? I had one question. If you could scroll back to, I wrote a note, which one? Exhibit E. So I was trying to figure out, you said that there's B4, I1, and I2 here. B4, which one is B4? because I didn't, you had, when you were talking, you were referencing something that wasn't on the map, so I
Right.
just wanted clarity.
So all of the zoning districts that are permitted are all lumped together here. So we're not differentiating between which of the specific districts. However, permitted districts are solid green. Special use requiring districts are the hatched green. The B4, the county B4 is equivalent to the city's B3, which is the general business zoning district. The B5 is their central business district, which there are no county central business districts within the city's boundaries or ETJ.
So just as this example, I mean, we have the city and the county special use, those are the hatched areas with colors. I guess I was most curious about the green block just north of Main Street. That seems to be almost encircling, county is almost encircled by the city of Urbana, right?
Correct.
So I was just trying to figure out, is that an area that would not require any of these special use permits, that they would allow it by right in that green area?
That is correct. This is a fairly industrialized zone, though. This is the CUMTD zone, and Solo Dart is down south and to the west. So there's city industrial zoning along that corridor as well, as a special use.
Does anybody have any questions for the county? No, thank you very much for attending tonight. I'll entertain a motion. James?
I'd like to make a motion that the city not protest this tax amendment
You like that on the consent agenda?
on the consent agenda.
I'll second. All right, moved by James and seconded by Jaya. Discussion. Grace?
Thank you. Thank you, Marcus, for the presentation and the information, and also the Plan Commission. I watched some of that meeting and appreciate some of their questions and kind of a detailed discussion on it. I appreciate the work on the county in making this possible. I definitely support less barriers for enhancing our local recycling systems. It's really unfortunate to hear, I think, in the memo and what heard from, word on the street, that we put the stuff out to the curb. The city of Urbana even coordinates recycling pickup, and then once you get it there, if it's sorted, and then there's nowhere to take it or nothing to do with it, and that this is a really big issue. So I appreciate the county doing all this work to very thoughtfully have a way to make it have less barriers for this kind of system to grow. And I hope / would request that staff who's notified about special use permit applications would share that with council and the public so that we have a chance to give those comments. Thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, I'm just going to quickly say that these votes are always tricky, so I'm just going to read what this section says so everybody is aware. So this resolution states it does hereby approve a resolution not to protest a proposed text amendment. So any vote of A would mean that you agree we should not protest. Any vote of nay means no, we should protest. So just so everybody's clear on that. So the motion on the table is to approve this resolution and move it to City Council on the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, that moves forward. Thank you very much. All right. Next item is ordinance number 2023-01002, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map R3 to B3 at 1009 Cunningham Avenue, plain case number 2466M22. Marcus, it's your night tonight.
Sometimes I have all the luck, the good luck. Mr. Nabil Masai, are you on the phone? We may or may not be joined by the applicant today. Nabil Masai requests to rezone 1009 Cunningham Avenue from R3 single and two family residential to B3 general business. A catering service, which is his proposed use, is not allowed in the R3 district, but is permitted by right in the B3 zoning district. The request aligns with the comprehensive plan and it adequately satisfies the rezoning criteria. As discussed at its January 5th meeting, the Plan Commission held a public hearing on this case. No members of the public spoke regarding the case, and the Plan Commission voted unanimously with 4 ayes and 0 nays to recommend that City Council approve the zoning map amendment. Staff requests that this case be placed on the consent agenda. The site is located on the west side of Cunningham Avenue, north of Kerr Avenue. The property is zoned R3, single and two-family residential. The adjacent properties are zoned B3 general business, that's the red, and R3, single and two-family residential to the west, that's the orange. Looking at the 2005 comprehensive plan, you can see that the site and the properties along Cunningham Avenue are designated for a future land use of community business. The requested rezoning would allow the applicant to redevelop the vacant lot and run a catering business at this location. Of course, because it's a rezoning, it would also allow any of the other uses that are in the B3 zoning designation, which is why you have a zoning description sheet as one of your exhibits. The requested rezoning would bring this property into conformity with the surrounding area as well as the comprehensive plan, which also identifies Cunningham Avenue as, quote, a corridor for commercial growth, which is designed to serve the surrounding residential neighborhoods as well as the community as a whole. The rezoning would also allow for the commercial redevelopment of a vacant property in the Cunningham Avenue Corridor Redevelopment Plan TIF District and the Urbana and Champaign County Enterprise Zone. If the property is rezoned, a 10-foot buffer yard would still apply to the west rear yard, as well as a landscape buffer with a minimum depth of 5 feet on that west side. That is because it would be adjacent to a still zoned R3 use. We have some slides for you. This is the recently demolished duplex before it was recently demolished. This is McAllister's Audio to the southwest and PDR Auto across the street. And this, I believe, is CU Automotive to the north. This is the site after the demolition. This is looking at the site from the west. You can see this is a residential neighborhood to the west of the property, and businesses across the street, and East Lawn Burial Park to the southeast. Another shot of the lot, you can see the homes on the west side. This fence line, property line, would be where that buffer yard with its landscape buffer would be required. There'd be no buffer required on either of these businesses to the north or south. Looking north along Cunningham Avenue and looking southwest towards McAllister Auto, as well as the Now and Zen Curio Shop. Oh, jumping ahead. Okay, summarizing the LaSalle and Sinclair criteria that city must adhere to for evaluating requests to amend the zoning designation. The proposed rezoning to B3 is compatible with the existing land uses and zoning of the immediate area. The current R3 zoning is not conducive to the future development of the site. Second, regarding diminishment of property values due to the current zoning, the R3 zoning district restricts the permitted uses for the property to only residential and some public uses. The proposed B3 zoning district would allow for commercial uses consistent throughout the Cunningham Avenue corridor, and without the rezoning, the property would likely remain vacant. Third, the proposed rezoning could have a positive effect on the general welfare of the public, as it would allow for the redevelopment of a currently vacant property. Fourth, both the public and the property owner would benefit from the proposed rezoning. The public would likely see no gain if the property remains zoned R3 and vacant. For the property owner, the restrictions on the R3 zoning district impose a hardship as the vacant lot could only be developed for small-scale residential or some public uses. Fifth, the property is suitable for B3 zoning and commercial uses, as the property is located in the Cunningham Avenue corridor, which is characterized by commercial uses. Sixth, the property has been vacant for 1 year, which was before the applicants purchased the property. Seventh, it is unclear if there is a need for more of the types of uses that would be allowed if the rezoning is granted. However, the proposed rezoning would allow for commercial uses in general, which better aligns with the zoning and land uses in the surrounding area. And lastly, in the comprehensive plan, the properties are identified as part of the community business future land use designation. The proposed rezoning to B3 would comply with the description of community business centers. Staff published a legal ad in the News Gazette to notify the public of the request and public hearing 15 days prior to the Plan Commission meeting. Staff sent letters to 34 neighboring property owners notifying them of the request and posted a public hearing sign on the property. Staff did not receive any public input regarding the requested zoning map amendment. The Urbana Plan Commission discussed the proposed zoning map amendment at its January 5th meeting and voted unanimously to recommend that City Council approve the proposed zoning map amendment. The findings are summarized in the staff report. City Council has the following options in this case: to approve the zoning map amendment based on the findings in this memo, or deny the zoning map amendment, and if so, articulate findings supporting the denial. Plan Commission recommendation is unanimously to recommend to City Council to approve this proposed amendment, and staff concur with this recommendation. That is the end of the presentation, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Sorry, did you mention that the applicant was available over the phone?
I did not hear him respond. Mr. Masai, are you on the phone and able to talk? He was out of the country, and there might be some issues with calling in.
Sure, no problem. Okay. Questions for Marcus? Sharice?
I guess my question is the person that is proposing this particular business venture, now, is he going to be building a new building there to have a catering business there? Is that, I was trying to see.
Well, as the site is vacant because they demolished the duplex, I assume they would have to build a structure to run the catering business out of.
Okay.
But we haven't discussed that because it's strictly about the rezoning to allow any
Zoning
future
right now.
use.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand if there was going to be a structure there, a food truck there, how
That-
he was thinking about that catering thing was going
Right.
to happen. What kind
I-
of plan he had.
Right. Have not discussed that. I believe it would allow either a structure to be built or if a mobile catering business wanted to set up there. It's more about the use, which is catering business, which would be permitted in that district. Any structures would, have to go through the whole building application process.
Okay.
Other questions for Marcus? Grace?
Thank you. And is this spot within the Cunningham TIF? Looks like it just barely
Yes.
is.
Yes, it's a
right?
very long name, but yes, it's in the TIF district as well as the enterprise zone.
And so they might be eligible for other assistance that's eligible to any other businesses in the TIF area?
Yes, and I believe there's the newly established sign grant program, which is a 50/50 grant.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, I'd entertain a motion. Chandra?
I'll move ordinance number 2023-01-002, an ordinance amending the Urbana zoning map R3 to B3 at 1009 Cunningham Avenue, plan case number 2466-M-22, with recommendation for approval on the consent agenda.
Second. Moved by Chandra, seconded by Jaya. Any discussion? Grace?
Thank you. Thanks again for presentation and information here. I'm in support of this, and I just wanted to mention while we were looking at the photos and talking about the TIF district, still would love to see some of that beautification that was part of the original TIF with that Cunningham area. Looking at the state of the sidewalk on that side of the street up close in the pictures, you know, just something that stuck with me that I would just like to say, again, another reminder to, I would love to really put our feet to the fire and get some things done with Cunningham TIF since it's expiring in a few years. Thank you.
All right, Chandra.
I agree with that, and I am definitely in support of changing this zoning. It is in my ward, and I do would like to see more businesses up and grow in that area, as well as the beautification Grace was talking about. So I appreciate you bringing this this change to us, and I'd like to see more zoning changes to support, you know, things that we need in our community. Thank you.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No, this
No.
is an ordinance. It takes a
Oh.
roll call.
Sorry. Thank you, guys. All right, will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
All right, that moves on to City Council's consent agenda. Are you done for tonight? Because there's another plane case on here. Is that Scott's? That's you. And Scott. All right, Scott, come join us. All right, next up is ordinance number 2023-01003, an ordinance approving a special use permit for solar farm at 1210 East University Avenue, plan case 2464 SU 22. We have Marcus and Scott Tess with us.
Good evening. This is a request by Mr. Test for a special use permit to allow Total Energies Renewable USA to install, operate, and maintain a solar farm of up to 15 acres. The City of Urbana owns the closed landfill at 901 North Smith Road. The city and Total Energies have entered into an agreement giving the company the option to lease all or part of the property to install, operate, and maintain a ground-mounted solar energy at this site. A solar farm is permitted now with a special use permit in the Ag and CRE zoning districts, which make up the site. Mr. Tatey, are you on the phone?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Chad Tatey of Total Energies is attending via phone to answer questions, as is Mr. Tess. At its January 5th meeting, the Plan Commission held a public hearing on this case. No members of the public spoke regarding the case, and again, the Plan Commission voted unanimously to recommend that City Council approve the special use permit with one condition. Staff requests that this case be placed on the City Council consent agenda. The project site is located between East Perkins Road and Butso Drive, west of Interstate 74 and east of the landfill recycling center. You can kind of see the north array and south array dashed outlines in the larger landscape recycling center complex. This would be the site of the special use permit. It is on a portion of the closed municipal landfill complex which operated from the 1920s until it was closed in 1988. Here is the zoning. You can see that the northwest corner is zoned CRE, Conservation, Recreation, Education, and the south portion is zoned Ag. Both of these zoning districts allow a solar farm with a special use permit. The proposed solar farm is the second phase of the development of solar energy systems at the landfill. In 2018, Council approved a special use permit allowing the construction and operation of a 20-acre solar farm approximately 500 feet east of the proposed project site. So that's over in this area here, and there is a picture in your staff report showing the actual built-out solar farm at the landfill, currently up and running. The current special use permit request is to redevelop 15 acres, which includes 2 solar arrays designed to produce a total of 4.3 megawatts of electricity. The city passed the solar energy text amendment in 2022. The ordinance requires that inverters shall be at least 150 feet from all property lines. In this case, screening would not be required, as the proposed solar farm is more than 500 feet from the nearest residential use. Staff recommend that the north array be at least 80 feet from the center line of the saline branch drainage ditch in accordance with an unrecorded 160-foot maintenance easement held by the saline drainage district. This is reflected in the site plan that you have in your staff report. And you can see here where it says 160 feet saline drainage ditch easement. So they're already, and there is a 10-foot buffer here between where the easement ends and where the fence and construction area would begin. So we're already in the process of trying to get that easement, recognized by construction. The proposed solar farm application does meet the 3 criteria required by the zoning ordinance. First, that the proposed solar farm is conducive to the public convenience at the proposed location, in that it would redevelop 15 acres of closed municipal landfill, that the project would be self-contained on the site, and that its proximity to the interstate would allow easy access for construction materials and labor and for maintenance. Second, that the proposed solar farm would be designed, constructed, operated, and maintained similarly to the nearby solar farm and include characteristics to minimize unreasonably injurious or detrimental impacts to the public, which are detailed in the staff report. And third, that the proposed solar farm would conform to the applicable regulations and standards of the Ag and CRE districts and would not be out of character with the Ag and CRE districts, especially given the proximity of the nearby 20-acre solar farm. In overview, the redevelopment of the subject property with the proposed solar farm would be beneficial to the city and meet the criteria for special use permit approval. It would be an infill redevelopment of the closed City of Urbana landfill, a much higher and better use of the subject property than its current use as vacant land with few potential opportunities for reuse. As required by the zoning ordinance, staff published legal notice in the News Gazette to notify the public of the request. Staff also sent letters to neighboring property owners and posted 2 public signs on the hearing on the property. Staff received no inquiries regarding the proposed permit. The Urbana Plan Commission voted unanimously at its January 5th meeting to recommend that City Council approve the proposed special use permit. The findings are summarized in the staff report. And City Council has the following options in this case: to approve the special use permit, to approve the special use permit with certain terms and conditions, or to deny the special use permit, and if so, articulate findings supporting the denial. So we are going to then finish looking at the photographs. This is looking at the site from the north. This is the saline branch drainage ditch here. This is Guardian / Flexen Gate to the south. This is a portion of the landfill, and this would be the proposed north array and south array on the landfill complex. This is looking south across the Landscape Recycling Center's access drive towards Flexen Gate. This would be part of the property where the south array would be located. So coming to the Plan Commission recommendation, which is to approve the permit with the following condition, which is a minimum 80-foot buffer to the center line of the drainage ditch. And staff concur with this recommendation and request that it be placed on the consent agenda. That's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions, as is Mr. Tess or Mr. Tatey. Thank you.
All right, questions for Scott, Mr. T, or Marcus? Grace?
Thank you. Thanks for this. I love the multiple uses on our old landfill. I think it's a wonderful example of the possibilities of not being just a negative thing for us in the community. I didn't know if you could refresh our memory on some of the benefits to the city, like the application mentions lease revenue and reduced electricity costs, and just kind of how this agreement works with this company, because this is different than like the community low-income solar project and things, right? So if you could just tell us a little more about that relationship.
Good evening, Council. Scott Test, Sustainability and Resilience Officer. The stack of benefits for this project include, first and foremost, the developer will clear the vegetation, including woody vegetation you saw in some of the photos that really is undesirable on a landfill cap anyway. They will clear that site and prepare it for their own array. Second, they will provide lease revenue to the city to use the property. Third, we'll be adding renewable energy to the energy mix of the state. And fourth, the TIF district that this is in will get tax revenue paid for by the developer.
James?
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is great. I think you gave us indication this was coming a while back, and it's good to see it come to fruition. If I could ask a question, maybe the person on the phone can answer this. What is their practice with regard to supporting pollinators on their grids?
Yeah, I'll let Chad Tatey respond to that on the phone.
Yeah, good evening, Council. This is Chad Tatey. So in the past, in the previous project and other sites in Illinois, we have, recognized I think it's called the pollinator scorecard. There was some legislation recently passed in the state, which I'm speaking off the top of my head, includes things like using native grasses and seed that supports pollinators. We'd be willing to comply with that, and we have to report what we do, but we would also intend to use a pollinator mix of seed for any grass that we would plant after we install the system. So,
all right, thank you.
Other questions? All right, I'd entertain a motion.
I'd like to
James?
move. Oh.
James is gonna, you're as.
I'll move ordinance number 2023-01-003, an ordinance approving a special use permit, solar farm at 1210 East University Avenue, plan case 2464-SU-22, to City Council on the consent agenda for approval.
I'll second.
All right, moved by James and seconded by Sharice. Any discussion? All right, with none, would the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu?
Yes.
Mr. Evans?
Yes.
Ms. Hersey?
Yes.
Ms. Colacetti?
Yes.
Ms. Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Wilkin?
Yes.
Mr. Quisenberry?
Yes.
All right, thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Marcus. All right, that ends our new business. We're moving on to discussion. First up is a summary of recommended changes to the CPRB ordinance. It says Councilmember Wilkin and the Civilian Police Review Board, but I thought it was Carol and the CPRB.
I requested it. I'm not really part of the presentation. I
Okay.
requested the discussion.
Okay, gotcha. All right. After you get situated, your microphones can be moved, and there is a on and off button. All right, I think we have our technical issues resolved. And Ricardo, and forgive me, I've forgotten your name.
Tony Allegretti.
Tony, thank you. You two will be doing the presentation for us tonight? All right, excellent. The floor is yours.
There we are. Thank you. I realize it's late, and I was trying to think, what's my consolation to thank you for all your nights here that you spend on Mondays and Tuesdays? And then I thought, well, shoot, we do Friday nights and Thursday nights until about as late as you guys do. So you guys lose the beginning of the week. We lose our end of the week at the Civilian Police Review Board. So it's a consolation, because this is very important, and we realize that this has, the CPRB has a lot of context. I appreciated several of the public contributions on this. What we want to share with you tonight, I hope, is in the spirit of discussion. We have been working at this for quite a while, both from the staff and from us. The pages, the paper copies that you got are what we had agreed on before I had some time. And so then I changed things around a little bit. So this will be the latest, but that's the basis in which we, you'll see it here. The colors change, but the context should be about the same. Or the first part of it. The last part of it is something that we contribute. So I'm going to go over some of this very quickly, but I just want to ground us. The Police Review Board essentially, and I summarized it, it essentially has two functions. One is information to the public, and the other one is to review the actions of police when they come up in a complaint, and then we review and appeal to the complaint. While we keep track of complaints, we don't actually do much with the complaints, but we now have a system in which you see them in the portal as soon as they come in. But where it really, where we come into play is at the appeal process. In recent years, we also participated in developing and then in being part of the launch of the TASER usage review. And we started out with the writing and then any unholstering and a required unholstering and recording of the TASERs. And then we procedurally changed. We finished that process. We turned in a report to you, but in the meantime, we started just watching the usage when the trigger was pulled, and that's what we started to review and left all the other ones without further supervision, if you will. But I wanted to give you that because that's where we are, and I want to give you the context of the last 3 years. The last 2, I have been chair, and so we've been working on several things. But the fact that in 2020 we had so many complaints and appeals really, really made a difference in our lives. We used to meet every 3 months, 60 minutes, we were on our way. And we may be headed into that, but in the meantime, we still have a lot of appeals that we're going through. So the pandemic happened during this period too, and so it made things even harder. And so the biggest point that I want to make here is that going through the appeals, both as staff and as board, we have gained a lot of knowledge as to what is being covered in the CPRB, how it applies to different cases, and how we can and must do some changes so that the next group of the CPRB can do better than what we have been able to do to date. The other part is that as we'll present you some considerations, they're mostly based on something that you received, but we received amply, was a document called the Residents' Petition for Reforming the City of Urbana's CPRB. And I'm going to go through that a little bit more detail so that, one, you're aware that where many of these ideas were considered, and because it was a long document with many, many sections and requests, what we did, both as CPRB and with staff, we put it into categories. We call them buckets. And so what you're going to see a lot of is how these buckets came to be and how they're being addressed. So basically, those buckets of propositions by a group of citizens, we put them into the category of bucket 1, these changes we can make within the present rules. Bucket 2, we're going to need some ordinance changes. In bucket 3, we would have to change the format of the CPRB or the whole structure of it. And so as we consider some of these things tonight, and it might be useful for you to consider these buckets. In the middle there, I'm going to bring up a bucket 2.5, which I'd like to end with, because there are changes that don't require structural change, but they require something bigger. than what we have in just tweaking the present ordinance. And I'll come back to that to end. But that's the part that Carol hasn't had, well, we might have talked about certain parts of it, but we haven't discussed them amply. So these are, so as I go through the buckets really quickly, it's for you to grasp the quality of those proposals and as we consider them, how they went. In the bucket one, that is changes that we could make, we picked them up. Once we saw them, we looked for feasibility and we started changing them. They didn't require to be coming to you unless you want to. But these are the kinds of changes that we made. You know, forms, the biggest one that we had a lot of complaints about and eventually even contradicting legal, we didn't have to notarize the complaint form. We eventually just took a vote on it and the form was changed, and ever since then we don't notarize a complaint. But there's been others. One of the biggest ones that we had at that point related to the hearings that we were doing at that time is we said, you know, we really need to include people on the board that have a felony conviction, which the original ordinance specifically excludes. And I put it here because it's a transition into bucket two. We brought it to you a little over a year ago. Katrina Kindle, a member of our board, came and reported to you, and we said, we have agreed that this is a change that we'd like to do. As I wrote to you a couple of weeks back, this was for us a big step. We brought it, and essentially Katrina reported that the city council told her to report back and say, bring it back with a group of the changes that you want, not just this single one. So we, as far as we knew, we're in the process of, and we have been working over the year. We've met several times to whittle down the list into something more feasible. So then bucket two is really what you would anticipate receiving from us, but it's also very much of something that we have, especially through the hearings, had a lot of contributions. There's a lot of commas, a lot of definitions, and then there are those proposals that were given by the residents' letter that you see here. The little letters at the end of the paragraphs refer to which part of the resident's letter. If you need a copy of it, I can still get it to you. But as I show them to you, some of them are things that we could have agreed on, but some of them were things that we didn't feel comfortable passing on to you directly. So they're still under consideration, and we're tweaking them to give them to you. There are some that go to specific cases that have been before the CPRB and appeals. I mean, these considerations. And so we want to be honest. There's a lot of mingling and mixing, but for us, it was a way of representing and considering what the citizens were presenting to us. Feel free to cut in. So anyway, so as we put these in and considered them, we are playing a role in coming to you at a crucial time, yes, but we're here for the long run, and we want to make sure that the CPRB does what the citizens, and we hope what the council also wants it to do, and that is be a body that gives accountability, that gives the public further trust in the police. We don't have, as somebody mentioned before in one of the letters, personally, I have seen and learned quite a bit about the police department, and we're not doing too badly. You look at the national scene, and we have some things to brag about, or maybe many. So anyway, these considerations are on your list, on your paper. Like I said, they come very specifically from paragraphs of the letter. So this page are some of the things that we've been working on and that we'd like to spell out because they are the ones that are turning into specific proposals for you. We have to revise our procedural manual for some of what we do, especially in hearings, but we're going to need some help. There's definitions, there's parts that the ordinance doesn't provide for, and so we will come back to you. On the taser side, we have started acting really without an ordinance coverage when it comes to what we decided to do, which is only the times that the trigger is pulled will we look at the case. There are too many instances in which tasers are being unholstered. Luckily, we don't have to listen to the camera anymore. They used to have the only camera in the room. Then the cars had a camera, but now every policeman policewoman has a camera. So the taser cameras don't no longer help us. So anyway, there are other things like when can we do a dismissal of a complaint? Because right now the ordinance gives us essentially 3 options that we have to use, and sometimes it has messed up anything that we have to say because the specific way in which you have to report back basically says, do you agree with the chief's report or not? And sometimes it wasn't even the chief that wrote the report, so how do we agree with the chief that, that kind of stuff. So the last 2 there are procedural ones, but we need cover as to how we run a hearing because the procedures right now, we're stretching them. And then the last part is Carla and I have been working for the last while. We generated a 5-year report for the CPRB, and we're working on the last 3 years, and then we'll be current. We're almost there, and you'll get to see the numbers. You'll get something that has never been done before, which is a listing privacy protected, but of all officers and how many complaints there are about them. It's something that we've been working for a long, long time. So that's something that we're working on. The 3rd section, as you see here, is one that we mutually agreed very fast. The next level up for a review board, at the time we were thinking, is a board with investigative power, which would require us to basically step off because I don't feel like I have the training to do that. And then it would require probably more money being spent to have that kind of board. I have a friend in the Philly Police Review Board, and it is more than a full-time job when it comes to investigating. So anyway, so that's what we did on for the buckets from the citizens, the residents petition. The last section I want to show you is other things that worry us, and especially myself as chair. The biggest one right now is that, darn it, I can't get a quorum very easily. We have 6 members, but one has been sick for a while, which means now I have 5, and lining everybody up and getting everybody to have 3 board members under the circumstances, at least, has been very hard. The last 6 or 8 months, we have canceled more meetings than we should, but especially for fairness, both for police and for the person appealing. It's just really, really sad. So we are starting soon a church tour to visit and ask the pastors and other people to consider applying. And we come back to the part of we need to put before you that you consider and take whatever measures it is to look at why there are exclusions on the ordinance for people with felonies and with people with law enforcement experience. Right now, it spells out that it's federal, state, and local. We have had applicants that have had experience, and darn it, it hasn't been good.
It's beyond just a felony conviction. If you read the language of the statute, it says any plea to a felony. So you could theoretically plea to a felony, get some sort of expungible probation. Under the ordinance, you could read that person could be removed or not allowed on the board. It's a blanket, any felony that can be driving on a revoked license, retail theft for the prior. So, you steal a candy bar twice from the Quickie Mart 2 different times, you're a felon, which is charged in this county. I've seen it, as in my own.
He's a lawyer. He's got those specifics.
I've seen those cases in prior work I've done. So, it's not just someone with a prior murder conviction or a serious sex assault. It runs the whole gamut. So there is some middle ground potentially if the board or the council is concerned about blanket reversal of that to a blanket allowance. There's some middle ground there if there's concern about opening up the floodgates to just anybody, but.
Well, and there's two counters already that happen. The mayor appoints people, we interview them, we could easily at the interview exclude somebody, and also there's supposed to be 7 members of the board. If one person is particularly slanted one way or the other people outvote them. In my 8 years in the CPRB, there has always been a very fair group voting when it comes to when somebody's really pushing a particular section. They just get outvoted. So for me, this is a no-brainer when it comes to inclusion, so that we can get anybody considered, any member. There is no other commission that has a felony exclusion like this. So you should, you know, if not now, when is for me the question as to when this gets taken off. Now, the 2.5 roles of this is the next 3 pages are things that we have discussed within ourselves as to if we can't change the structure, can we change the role that we play both for the city, for council? This, Carol is not on board for, she hasn't seen, so please don't put any of this on her. But we have come up with 4 sections in which perhaps our role ought to be one that is more than checking and reviewing a complaint, but actually being part of the process to strengthen the presence of police when it comes to the trust in them, when they're doing right, and when they're not, that they get called on. So basically, we ask you to consider that you give us, that you delegate to us a way to collect information, whether they're collecting it already and we aggregate it so that it's fair, but it shows what's happening behind the wall of what the police is.
And it's also anonymous, too. We're not in the business of trying to out any particular officer through these reviews of the data.
And so it makes a big difference when citizens are looking at it and we don't have an axe to grind when it comes to anti-police or pro-police. We just want to serve as the eyes of the public. The same would be when there's deliberations, reports that have to do with the police. We'd like to be part of that. Or the last one is that the complaint process itself needs to be changed at times, and we don't have full process of that. We don't have mayordomia, stewardship over that section. The last part that you should know about by now, but that it's coming anyway because it just went into effect. Go ahead, Tony, because these 2 parts are hard.
Sure. So some of these things are regarding how the Safety Act that's currently on hold, pending the lawsuit that's going on with the state's attorneys, I'm sure you're aware of. But most of these things are not regarding cash bail. Actually, none of them are regarding cash bail, which is what the main point of that lawsuit is. These are just sections of the ordinance. The first one, 19-28. This, I think, has already been changed. However, it's not reflected in the ordinance, so we're just seeking that this be cleaned up regarding a verified complaint. We've removed the notarization requirement. Law under state law removes any requirement that there be a sworn complaint. So that's, we think, kind of an easy, low-hanging fruit one to change. The second section, 19-26, we're asking that we be given more access to information that's contained or controlled by the city. Remove the ability of the city attorney or other officials to redact this. We think this is fair to give us more access because we're already required to maintain confidentiality. If one of the members were to somehow break that confidentiality, disclose things that weren't, that shouldn't have been disclosed, they can be removed from the board, possibly face other sanction. 19-37, the suspension of proceedings. This comes into play when we get a complaint from a complainant. It doesn't necessarily have to be the one that's subject to the suit. It could be someone who witnessed the account, and if the incident involves either a criminal case that's been filed by the state's attorney's office, or there's even the whisper of a civil suit against the city, someone will claim the recipient of the alleged misconduct will claim, I'm going to sue the city. That shuts down all the review. 9 times out of 10, maybe 99 times out of 100, that lawsuit never shows up, and this incident doesn't get reviewed. So we're asking that the mention of a criminal, or the fact that a criminal case has been instigated or charged, not preclude us from reviewing it. Whether or not, there is a criminal case against somebody, alleged misconduct by the police should be reviewed regardless of if there is a conviction by that individual, because it may not be that individual who's actually complaining. The second thing regarding the civil matter, we're requesting that until the case is actually filed, we'd be able to review this, because again, we think it's a very low risk that there's actually a civil suit with with a lot of the things that we're actually seeing. 1938.
Actually, before you go on
ahead.
that, there are already cases that have been suspended. They're just floating out there, and they're not necessarily coming to us because there's no specificity. We're working on that list with Carla of what cases have been suspended and never came back to us. That's a big hole in the transparency that we would have over cases. Go ahead.
Sure. And then in 38, the information sharing, we're asking for access to internal investigations without police authorizations. Currently, we need to get police authorization. Again, the board members are subject to non-disclosure. It's part of their requirements to serve on the board. That's included in the other part of the ordinance. They can easily be removed by the mayor, which we all serve at the pleasure at on the board. We don't think that would be a major issue if we were allowed to have that access. Again, this goes along the lines of what we were talking about in bucket 2.5, is to provide a broader use of this board to review aggregate data and see if we can identify trends and bring that to the attention of either the police or the council to hopefully prevent certain things from happening or stop things that we think are happening. I think, we're on the next slide.
Well, it's the last one, but we want to finish with this in that we realize that you are all, both city and council are in a context that has many other branches, except that we are charged with a specific part, which is our title would say it, that we are a review board for the police. We are the review of appeals right now, and we're saying, well, if you want a group to be reviewing the police, then we would be it, but you have to change then there. Whatever it takes, whenever it takes, that's on you. We're here to provide information and to provide the mechanics of how citizens, residents come up and have contact with the police. We have other details, but of course this is always too long than compared to, but we finally came to see you, so.
Just a couple other things with changes to state law. All misconduct records now have to be permanently retained. They can't be destroyed. We just think this is an additional justification to give us access to those records to review them, make sure that they're still there, they're not going anywhere, and point out any concerns we have in city or in police policy or violation of the policy. There's an establishment of a professional conduct database that is retained by ILITSPA, which is the Illinois Law Enforcement Training Standards Board. What that does is, what they're now required to do is maintain a database of that's available to any chief of police, administrative officer, or a designee. So we're proposing that the CPRB be made a designee that would have access to that database, and that would be used to screen new hires. We envision an idea of potentially having those new hires be brought before the CPRB. They can be interviewed, discussed. We would have access to any potential records that are in that database and be able to review that. It could also be a position or a place where public comment could be directed at that particular hearing. It'd be handled by the CPRB at first. And pardon my ignorance, I don't know exactly what happens when a new hire is hired. If I don't know if the council has to approve it, but whoever would sign off on it, we could put our recommendation forward to them. But giving us access to this information could, again, just be another screening process for a new hire that comes to the city. The statutes that I listed there, I didn't go into detail about what they've done, but they've made major changes to what a police officer can and can't do when making an arrest, when someone is trying to escape, when prohibited uses of force, coming into contact with an individual or executing a search warrant. All of those things I think are ripe for review by our board, especially based on the changes that are there. Again, a lot of those things, these are all criminal offenses or listed under the criminal law. A lot of those things aren't going to end up being reviewed by the state's attorney in this county or any county really. So it falls really right within the ambit of our board to review and make sure that those new criminal procedures are being followed, and if there's a complaint about it, that it come before our board. A couple other new, the next three are criminal offenses. If an officer fails to render aid, fails to intervene, fails to include or provide facts in a report, there's a number of different procedural things that if they fail to do those things, one is it could be charged as a criminal offense. Again, whether it's not, is or isn't, is at the discretion of the state's attorney. However, our board could review those things and under our lower burden, make a determination as to whether or not, those acts did or did not in fact occur per our board's review. That's really it I had for those.
Yeah, so that's our presentation when it comes to both the shared material at the beginning and then the last parts that only come from the CPRB. We want to be of service to the community to build that trust. I believe in our police department and the story that they can construct, but having access to the information only helps them. And it's very hard, I have seen, for people to share information, but as you'll see when we come out with a report, the number of complaints against our police is actually quite reasonable. And people should know that too, instead of building up and conjuring an enemy.
All right, questions for Tony and Ricardo? James?
Yeah, thank you very much for this. I'm finding a lot of things in here that make sense. I'm finding some things in here that I'm not sure make sense. It would be really helpful to get a copy of this, because I found things in the presentation that didn't quite line up with this previous version, and I'm sure that's because of the editorial process, and I'd like to have them to look at. I did have like one really specific question. If you could roll back to almost the very beginning, maybe the second slide. There was a statement about,
Go ahead and give the topic and.
yeah, well, there was a bullet that said all of the most of the complaints were coming from one source. And I would like to yeah, there we go, number 2.
What's this one?
Can you explain what that means?
It means that we received a lot of complaints and then request appeals to what the police department had done or city had done, and therefore then we are obligated, and that's the kind of
But what's the source?
the source is
An individual
an
or-
individual
Okay.
putting in things. I must say, because of the many complaints and appeals through that source, we have learned quite a bit about many places where we needed to bolster both procedure and even ordinance. But going through all of them is a lot of resources.
And the other, actually, this may be more a question for Mary Alice or Sharice, but what is the current situation with any appointed board? I understand the mayor can ask for someone's resignation because they do the appointment. What's the process? Has council, have you observed council removing someone from a board or commission?
No,
Is it-
I
is
personally
it
have never seen
defined?
that.
Is it defined? Is there a process defined?
I honestly don't know.
Okay.
I've never seen it in the 5 years that I've been on city council. Go ahead, sorry.
Okay.
I don't know the answer
Sharice,
to that.
I saw Sharice.
I was just gonna say that, I know before I was appointed to the board that I was on, that I'm on, that I am on, I was, number one, asked if that was a board that I could be on. And it was because of my background in education and stuff like that, I was even thought of. And I would think that I think the issue, at least and I don't think that, I've never known Mayor Marlin to ask somebody to resign or leave. I think if, I know there are people who do for whatever reasons they can, but the other thing is that I thought was a good idea, because I kind of saw that when it was said that people could come and talk to the city council or interview kind of with the city council or have a statement or something like that. Some people have done that. They have before we appointed them, before the vote came up. But it's not a requirement. Like during this time, we had so many appointments just for this seat right here. Because people were sick, people left, and whenever there's an appointment, people have to come and present themselves to city council for city council, but I don't recall it being like that for boards or commissions. But some people I do recall a few people coming in.
That's getting to a secondary point, right? So
Yeah.
the first question
Right.
was in terms of, can city council remove a member from a
don't
board?
think
And
we
at
can. I
least from
think
this
mayor
highlight
can.
here, it looks like only a mayor can
Yeah.
Okay.
in the ordinance. But separate, I think one of the things that you were talking about was having potential members come to city council, which is not something that we have done in the past, not to say it's not something that could be done in the future, before appointments are made by city council. Did you have other questions, James?
Well, I was just going to follow up and say, some of the things that I think I want to know more about are areas where the suggestions move into the realm of what I think might be council's responsibility or might be misconstruing the responsibility of council versus the mayor and the kind of government that we have. And I'm really concerned about the suggestion of what sounds like prosecutorial responsibility that you were describing a little bit earlier, which the city has no place of stepping into discretionary prosecution.
No,
You said if the state's attorney's not going to do it, we're going to do it. And
What I was saying is if someone were to bring a complaint under what has now been outlawed, we're not a prosecutorial board. We can't even get a police officer to show up in front of our board if we wanted them to. So it would be just a review of the conduct, and we look at whether or not they're following policy, and if those are now outlawed per state law, I think that's something that's within the board's purview of reviewing. I'm not saying, we don't have any prosecutorial authority. What I'm saying is prosecuting police in general, not just in this county, in this state, in this country, is not something that is done with any regularity. It's increased, but it's not something that you're going to see any local prosecutor pick up a torch and run with, absent some few jurisdictions. But it's a place where I think the board can step in, be an outlet for complaints about certain things. And there may be nothing there, but it provides that sort of oversight that the community is looking for.
Just a clarification. Presently, the CPRB has the opportunity to review a case, but what we are left with as a decision is only to support, not support, and we'll be asking for dismissing a case because sometimes it just shouldn't go on. But we don't have any power whatsoever, both in the legal sense. We can send a letter, notes, to the chief. When it comes to the tasers, we can say something that maybe the policy ought to be changed, and that's it. We have no power whatsoever as to the conclusion of any one case. And we wouldn't under what we're proposing. What we're proposing in the expanded role is that we have access for the public so that we can see, because that's about the only thing that we would have, is for the public to know that somebody else has seen it behind the door or behind. Presently, we have a portal in which we see the complaints. That is a really great progress, and we thank the city for doing it that way, because now we can see the full complaint online whenever it comes in. We just had one this week, and we can see it instantly as soon as the procedure of intaking is out. But we don't have any other power.
Just because we see that complaint doesn't mean we review it. We don't have any authority to take it up. It's just someone has filed a complaint, we're able to look at it. If there's an appeal, then we'd see it. But again, and it's a up or down vote, is do we think what the internal investigation by the police was, do we agree with it or do we disagree with it? And then that's it.
All right. Bottom line is, I would appreciate a copy of this so that we can dig
Well,
into
in
it a
fact,
little
Carol will get one
deeper
too, because it wasn't
to-
her fault that she didn't get one.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
just me after the fact, so.
Because we can dig in a little deeper and understand what you're trying to do.
Excellent.
Chris?
Yeah, well, I'm going to say at the outset that everybody is going to disagree with everything I'm going to say, but I was there in 2011. Let me hit on some fast points here. Number one, you're asking for a felon to be on your board. Well, the reason that got put in, that there was a prohibition against felons, was we had two guys warming up in the bullpen ready to go on the board in 2011, but because the police wanted retired police officers on the board. So that was the trade-off. All right, you're not going to have police officers on the board. Well, you're not going to have felons on the board. So that's how that got done back in 2011. My thought was always, why can't we have a representative from the public defender's office? Why can't we have a representative from the state's attorney's office, the judiciary, and the College of Law on the board to kind of give expertise in terms of, the legal realities? I mean, Tony, you run into this. Well, when the officer grabbed my arm, was that against the law? Yes, no? I mean, who knows? But legal expertise would help if we had that. But anyway, if you ask for felons, I'm pretty sure somebody's going to ask for retired police officers. The question becomes, are they biased? Do they have an agenda? You're telling me, Ricardo, that 6 of us can outvote them if that becomes a problem. So maybe it's not a problem.
Well, I can tell you from the last 8-10 years that I've been around that has always been true, and we get outvoted. I've been outvoted several times. But more importantly, when you limit the kind of expertise that can come to the board, you have limited the ability for the board to give a good and fair decision. Whether it's a lawyer or whether it's somebody who has been arrested and knows what it's like, or somebody who has done the arrest for a particular reason and for a particular policy that we don't have. And I must tell you, it's been very hard, both use of force or sometimes when there is a policy cited in the investigation, we have to go look it up. And darn it, there's a lot of policies for police to keep track of.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to us, we get a very reduced and boiled down version of it. And I would appreciate if I had law enforcement that could explain it to us. I must say, not everybody on the board is going to be in agreement as to bringing in everybody. But it needs to be discussed because it's been 11, 12 years since all that happened. And maybe it's time that we pave the way to have a full inclusive board.
Yeah.
Is what we're asking.
I'm not saying we shouldn't have ex-retired police officers on the board. I mean, they could provide some good expertise, just as a ex-felon can provide good expertise. So I agree with you on that. We haven't touched on third-party investigations. Do you want to maybe give your opinion, your thoughts on that? When I say third-party, let me identify some parties that might have a legitimate reason to investigate a police officer. The complainant himself, the media, the complainant's family, the complainant's lawyer, the complainant's, I'm trying to think, just those kind of people. Let me also give you some context. Back in 2015, we saw what happened, how the city of Champaign handled the Officer Matt Rush case. If you remember that, they emptied his entire personnel file to the News Gazette. They gave every video and dash cam video to the News Gazette, and he was tried in the media. Didn't work. The arbitration system overruled Chief Cobb's firing of him and put him back on the force. Eventually, they had to pay him $50,000 to leave. So what I'm saying is that it was, I don't know, the public was kind of relieved and appreciated the public nature of the way that particular case was handled. It wasn't secret. So the problem with you guys that I'm hearing is that you're private, you're secret, and nobody else can investigate but the police. Not even you can investigate anything. So let me dump that rant on you, and you respond.
Well, let me abstract from it in a second, but let me add one more person to the possibility of complainants. There have been a couple of times in which we saw that something happened, and as members of the board, we knew enough that we would like to lodge a complaint ourselves over something that we see in the system. We have currently no procedure for somebody who has seen it enough to raise the flag. It wouldn't matter because we don't have a way to lodge a complaint ourselves. So that's up for consideration. I must say, it's not only a touchy subject, there are many angles to that subject as to who can lodge a complaint for what. So to abstract now is let's say that we write the letter of what you would like the CPR to be in order to build trust between the community, the police, and therefore the city. When you define that, then we can go to the specifics of which parts of a party to voice the complaint. In my estimation, if no one else is able to lodge a complaint, then the CPRB ought to be able to lodge a complaint, even if it goes to another hearing or somewhere else. When something is wrong, somebody ought to be able to call it. It could be council members, it could be board, it could be anybody else. But when it doesn't happen, and one of the first things we see, and I've heard from police that other people consider Urbana police to be, let's just say, nasty. It may or may not be true, but we can't contradict that narrative until we have ways to build the trust and to say, no, they're not. It says right here, look at the complaints, right? We can't even do that under the present system.
Yeah, I think a second
Chris,
function.
just give me a moment, please.
Sure,
It's 10:25. We have 5 minutes left in the meeting. This is what I'd like to propose that we do. I propose that we extend the meeting till 11. We let everybody have one opportunity to have a question. Perhaps you'd be willing to come back in about 2 weeks once we've had an opportunity to digest some of the information and ask follow-up questions. Does that sound like a plan for everybody? That's a good plan. Okay, so can I have a motion to extend the meeting till 11?
Motion to extend the meeting to 11.
Second.
Very enthusiastic, Sharice. Moved by
yeah.
Sharice, seconded by James. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. And I'm going to yield my time and let others ask questions.
Jaya?
Thank you. Thank you all for this presentation. I would reinforce that I'd love to see both versions. And I think, and I don't know if this is more to the staff side, but we have this, what CPRB and staff are working on slide, improvements to this procedure manual that will inform changes to the procedural parts of the ordinance, et cetera. I would love to know where we are with those. So if we can get an update on, like, does that mean a discussion has happened? Does that mean that there's been, a tentative policy drafted? If we could get a little bit more information on where are we with those, because I think that's the low-hanging fruit, right? We're going to need some time to work through some of these meatier, more difficult topics, including figuring out how do we remove some of those restrictions for who can be on the board. But there's a whole list of things here that we can be working on, right? And that was one of the things that, I've been waiting on. I know we keep kind of saying, like, we're hearing there are changes coming. So to get a little bit clarity of where we are with some of these things would be really helpful.
We have a draft of the procedure manual that we're working through some of the thornier issues, trying to figure out, can we get consensus on it? Because what we would really like to do is to present to you ordinance revisions with as much consensus as possible, and then say, now here's where we diverge, and then let the public and anyone else comment on the positions that we've taken. And I hope we're still in that frame of mind, even though there's a lot of additional information that I heard for the first time tonight. I think we're committed to trying to bring something to you as a package. And it may be multiple packages because, one thing I just want everybody to be mindful of it, as there were many things that were introduced tonight as possible expansions of the scope of CPRB. We're struggling to do what CPRB is tasked to do right now, and we struggle to get a quorum. We're buried under this history of appeals that we have to have hearings on, that we've learned from them, but I feel like we don't have much left to learn from them, but we still have probably a couple dozen appeals to go. So just trying to manage all of that. So it may be that we come in, a couple different iterations, but fundamentally it has to be something that a volunteer board until if and when the council is ready to move to something a lot more robust that costs more money than we currently spend and implicates a lot more time on the part of the people involved. That's what we were trying to do is bring a set of proposals that work with the board as it's currently constituted.
Chandra, Grace?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming with us. I'm glad that we could have CPRB members and council here having this information share and collaborating. So I really appreciate sharing that and the work you guys are doing. I'm in full support of more oversight and transparency for the department, and CPRB being, as you said, kind of behind the door of what goes on in the department and having those kinds of eyes within that confidentiality bubble. I'm also definitely in support of policy changes involving CPRB. We've talked about some where, when someone wants to build a garage too close to the sidewalk, it goes to a commission and it comes to council for vote. But when we want to change training requirements for officers or the use of force policy, that doesn't have those same kinds of steps. So I would like to see a bigger picture of also including that in the process and taking these things, police policy changes, more seriously and having a more open process. I was wondering if maybe for the next time we talk, if you talk about, they have in the ordinance where it says the requirement that CPRB maintains a central registry of complaints, and I'm wondering how that works when you don't see them all and some are suspended, and if you could speak on that at the next one, if that's a bigger topic. And then also just another idea I wanted to throw out with this discussion. I got this in the mail, I think all council members did too, and on emails of also like automated police review systems that reviews body cam footage for like swear words or other kinds of things, just as an idea to kind of throw in the conversation as well. just to help with if there's any way that we could automate some of those things instead of watching through hundreds of hours of videos, if there is some AI thing that could help in some way, supplemental to the real human beings. I'm not saying as a replacement. And I'm looking forward to further conversations and collaboration on this. I'm really interested in those specific recommendations to the ordinance that you've highlighted here, and hoping to have more collaboration together and see what kind of changes we can make. Thank you.
Chandra and Sharice, you guys haven't had the opportunity to speak. Would you like to add anything, or Sharice?
Yeah, I just want to have the opportunity and the time to actually read up on all this stuff before, and your presentation is fine and all that. Anything else that you can give me that I can figure out, you know, I guess the one thing I worry about more than anything is the separation of branches within this. So I want to make sure everything is, well, basically constitutional. is where it falls. You know, I understand there's understand where a lot of the public is coming from regarding this, and I understand how they want you to have powers to do things. But then again, that's a branch of government that's like almost creating another branch of government, or another, at least a twig, to go on to do something that maybe our judicial branch has chosen not to do, or the legislative branch has said, no, you can't do that. I'm talking about the state, of course. And there's a lot more to it than just adding a sentence to an ordinance. You see what I'm saying? So I do worry about, I wonder about that. And I just want to be able to suss that out. I'm not an attorney, but I do study this stuff.
I don't know if we're proposing, violating the separation of powers. It's more of a, at least I look at it as, I mean, the mayor's office oversees the police, and if there's a internal audit of one department in one branch, like an auditor, internal auditor, and auditor general, that's perfectly allowable, I guess, and that's kind of where, at least in reviewing individual complaints, that's kind of what we do. We're not tasked with, and I don't think we're asking to get any sort of prosecutorial power here. It's simply to, be an internal watch on what's going on within the police department within individual complaints that are brought up, and possibly talking about expanding and looking at general policies, use of force policies, that sort of thing. So I understand the concern. I don't think we've ever asked for some sort of ability to impose some sort of a punishment or fine, or request to remove something. That is for elected officials and not for us. We're not seeking that at all. But to bring it to those officials' attention, I think, is part of our purpose, or could be.
All right, I am getting ready to wrap this up. Is there any last minute thing? Okay, my question to you guys is, has there been conversation at the CPRB in terms of designating, I'm gonna use the phrase buckets, they're using buckets, the types of complaints? At one point, about a year and a half ago, there was a conversation about, are these administratively reviewed, or are they reviewed by the board? And I just wanted to know if there was anything that was discussed at the board about those
Yeah.
two different kinds of.
So there's two items that are presently in the works to come back with, and that is, there was a point at which we put everything with complaint numbers so that no one would feel like we neglected anything. So in some of those for administrative decisions, it is one of the reasons why at least one of the changes must be that we are able to dismiss a complaint that's been appealed, because sometimes they have included those, that nature of a category. We talked a lot about triaging complaints. I think that and here I'll go to the money question. When we didn't have an HRO, it was really hard. Everything transferred to Carol, and Carol was intaking, crossing it was a lot, and naturally there were things that came through that, darn it, if we would have had another person on it, it would have been better. Perhaps we need to figure out what happens when the money's not allocated so that somebody isn't hired so that then that person doesn't do. Because as long as we have Carla intaking those complaints and they're going directly to her instead of at the police desk, because it is intimidating to put in a complaint about the police with the police. If they go to Carla, she's been excellent to take it in, to start it, and then call back the person and say, do you want to continue, and I'll type it up for you. That kind of support is vital. And especially because if you have it, it does not erode the confidence that outside people have as to what's going on in here. So that would be my answer there to categorizing. At the next meeting this week, we will have a consideration of what do we do about 34, 36 appeals that we have left? 34 appeals, because we need to expedite them. And we're going to have a proposal by one of the members of the board to expedite and just finally give a disposition on each one of these cases so that we can move on. I disagree that we have to have either the appeals finished or some of these changes. It's a parallel track. In my year and a half as chair, it's been regular meetings for long-term stuff and appeals to do the individual cases. And sometimes it's hard to schedule one or the other, but they're not necessarily related.
The number you dialed is temporarily unavailable.
Oh, good.
All right, well, thank you so much. We now, all right, Chandra.
So your changes were a lot of it based on the residents' petition. Have you done research on like best practices of CPRBs? Because a lot has changed in the 12, 13 years since this was started.
Yes, very much. Actually, Katrina Kindle, member of a board, went to the national conference this year to update us, and we're now members of the national association, so we can get those trainings and update us. We have done research when it came to actually the police academy guy, I forget, but he walked us through some of the options for structure, for example. So we have been learning about those, and that's why we could put the major change off and say that doesn't fit us. But in the meantime, we have to figure out what other changes are feasible to gain that trust that we'd like to have.
All right, thank you very much. So we have 21 minutes to talk about ARPA funding. Well, so let's be strategic in terms of how we use our time. Just as a reminder, I think most people saw that Will sent out a spreadsheet. It had 2 tabs on the spreadsheet. We had new buckets, leaning yes, maybe, and leaning no. And then the second tab allowed us to enter in some information in terms of, starting to allocate money. So tonight what I'd like to do is talk about, and you guys can correct me if you don't want to do this, but this is my proposal, is that we talk about, are there other ones that we can cut from the list that we're going to just say these are definite no's? And then talk about the second phase, which is how do we allocate funding? What is a way that we can coordinate it that would allow us to hopefully be able to actually write contracts with these people in February? I mean, they've been waiting a long time. So that's my proposal for tonight in terms of our conversation. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah, okay, all right, well, it would be great if we could show this. Well, it's all right. So,
Well, that was mostly what I was going to say. Continuing on from last week's discussion, revising the bucket list, I think the idea was to kind of come to a consensus on kind of what the leading yeses and maybes were, and then once there's some idea or some consensus on that, then to entertain the funding discussion. So I think the first order of business where we landed from last week's discussion was getting that list of potential projects to fund right first, and then the conversation on funding. So that's really all I have to say about that.
All right, okay, so, I guess, and I'll tell you kind of how I looked at things. One of the things, I added a column to the spreadsheet that just said, out of the no's, what proportion of the things people just said no funding towards. When I did that, I looked at all the ones that had 50% no's or higher. And that was kind of my justification for saying, okay, these are probably not going to get funded. I'm not going to consider them. That was my personal strategy. But if other people have ideas in terms of how we should minimize this list more, constrict this list a little bit more. Reese?
I'm just looking here on something that has more or less to like the maybes, which is like 25%, 25% or lower, or if there's zero maybes. I actually see one that's a zero maybe. I don't know how that got on the list. Because it seems to be like it would, I guess, I don't know. Seems like it would be a no-no. Period. But that may be another way to glean or to get stuff, you know. If you look at the maybes.
Other ideas? Jaya?
This wouldn't be for this moment, but being mindful of time, I think in terms of the maybes, if we can provide some clarification, if that's like, maybe if there's funding left over, right? Like, is that more towards no, or is that maybe, like, I still think it's a good idea, but I'm just not sure. Do you know what I mean?
How
if
did
that's
people
helpful.
define the maybe?
Right.
So before we go to the maybes, can I ask council if you feel comfortable omitting the 3 lean no's at the bottom? There's only 3 that lean no. How comfortable do people feel about omitting those? Grace?
I don't. I might be in the minority here. But I think it's just worth more conversation, I think, just to say, because initial round, you know, some people said no. I'd be curious as to the reasoning for why. I feel like it's, you know, it's a big deal of decisions, and what we haven't had is the discussions for why. And I feel like this is a kind of a complicated thing, and there are some that it's like, I could see it as this aspect, I could see this way, and I'm curious as to people's kind of justification for why or why not. So for me, it feels premature to cut something out without even really talking about the reasons why.
Any other comments on the suggestion to cut the lean nose? Jaya?
I personally feel comfortable with that. I think if we're going to explain every yes and every no, then we have to explain every yes and every no, and we would be here forever. So I think that people have a right to have made the decisions and presumably made them based off of facts. But I don't personally think that it makes sense to just now start introducing a requirement to justify a no.
Any other comments? Grace?
I just had a question if this stuff was publicly available yet? Like, have we been showing these lists and rankings or anything?
No, not at this point. So this is all draft, so to speak. It's all fluid and changing. So generally speaking, once there's a final list, you know, then we can talk about, you know, what goes public when. But generally speaking, as things are in the draft stages, we don't make them publicly available.
Well, the scoring was made publicly available, wasn't it? By
Yeah,
committee? All right.
so the sheet that I sent out in advance has not been, but the scoring, it was attached with all the presentations.
Correct.
So people know the scores, the requested, the projects, all that, all the individuals, you know, first impressions, you know, since impressions can change, they're not necessarily final documents at this time, nor is the process concluded. So at this point, not everything has been shared yet.
All right. So there's 2 things. James?
I was just going to say that based on similar reasoning from our last discussion, I would also agree that we could move forward with dropping the lean nose because of the number of people who have said that they don't believe they should be funded.
Okay, so I'm going to just do a straw poll so we can figure out how to move forward from this conversation, unless people have new things that they want to add. So my straw poll is going to be, just raise your hand if you think that we should eliminate the lean nose from the list for consideration of funding. All right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And please show of hands if you do not want to eliminate them. 1. All right. So those 3 are removed from the list. Now, I guess the bigger question, and we have 14 minutes for this conversation, is now comes the hard part. How do we figure out how we're going to decide what amount of money each of these individual projects are going to get? Chandra.
Did you all do the draft funding worksheet where you sort of assign some figures? I think like if that could be a start, like for instance, like the Urbana Free Library application, like if we could look at a range, like if, I mean, one council member said give them half or whatever, look at the range of each one. If everyone did this worksheet to the, you know, allocate money till it comes to close to 10 million. I got mine to 9.9. So like if everyone just allocates monetary amounts, we can have a range and then start the discussion on the lean yeses.
Okay. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, Chandra, let me understand what you're saying. You're saying we should probably just go ahead and assign money to the ones we want to fund. Yeah, individual, yeah, yeah.
You look at the sheet and you individually assign monetary amounts to what you want to fund. And then we come back and say, you know, look at that range and try to have I mean, it might take a while. Maybe we do 3 or 4 a night or whatever, and, you know, try to find a figure for each one.
So I'd like to add a qualifier to your suggestion. I do think that it would be good if we all independently and individually filled out our own spreadsheet. And then those spreadsheets are collated so that there is a mean and a standard deviation. You can see the variance between the numbers that council members suggest. My caveat here is I am cognizant that Carol reminded us that if we are going to give people partial funding, we have to be sure that they are able to do what they said they were going to do. And so my suggestion is, and although it's maybe not my suggestion, but there is a thing that says rationale. So when I went through and made my suggestions for myself, I put notes in there and said, I'm willing to do X with this amount of money. And so I think if we had both the mean, the standard deviation, and then a list of what people said that how they were going to partially fund people, that would give us a starting point. Jaya, did you want to add something?
I just agree.
Thank you. Grace?
I also agree with that as the next step. And I had some questions on this spreadsheet. So one of the many second to most recent email, maybe from Will on it, there's that tab of that draft funding worksheet. And I think that's what Chandra is referencing here. And if you could help me understand some of these columns. So I understand, you know, the name funding request, % of possible score, that's from the original staff and RPC scoring, right? Favorability based on council leaning yes over no, I get that one. Funding starting point as a percentage, that's the one I don't know where those numbers are coming from.
So you just multiply the % of possible score times the favorability rating, and then that's the starting percentage. So that one is just really a visual cue to kind of try to gauge how well it scored and how well it's like to kind of give a baseline value. Those are really just, I mean, they're not, I wouldn't even call them suggestions, they're just kind of a starting off point to just try to give some numerical value to think of how they all rank versus each other. Does that answer your question?
Yes, so then the funding starting point is you've just multiplied it by that % possible score and favorability rating?
Yes, and then, so that's the percentage, and then to get the actual number, that's, you multiply the percentage times the request, and then that's the starting point as far as the spreadsheet goes. But then, you know, the column next to it for the, you know, the initial ideas from individual folks, you don't have to do that. That's where the idea of the rationale next to it is. You might, you know, this is just a generic number. It may or may not make sense, and you can kind of go from there. But that just kind of offers a starting point to, I think, start jogging the brain.
So I just want to add in that starting point is Will's idea, starting point. It's not a starting point from where
Yeah.
council should be. So it was
Yeah.
just a suggestion. I hate to say it, but I kind of ignored the starting point.
No,
Yeah,
and it was there, take it or leave it, so.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was gonna say, because it makes sense mathematically, but in reality, it'd probably be a little different.
James.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will have to admit, I ignored it as well. I used the original funding request for a couple of reasons. One is, there's nothing built in here that scored the presentations. And so we have the scoring from the initial pass, and that's an important piece of information to have, but we don't have scoring beyond that process. So it became more, how a proposal scored became something else when people sat in front of us and answered questions about their proposal. And the other thing is, using that funding starting point as a percentage, 98%, what's that mean for that particular proposal? You know, cutting 2% off of that, that has no logic behind it with regard to whether that program can be done at 98%, or if you go down and find one that's, 25%. That doesn't take into the account the advice that Carol gave us to look at when we make this justification of partial funding. It needs to be relative to what they asked for and what the component parts are that could be adjusted, whether it's number of staff or different parts of the project that you might want to support or not support. That's why I didn't feel like this mathematical approach had relevance with how I wanted to proceed.
All right, so any other ideas in terms of how to move forward? James?
I'm just going to say that the suggestion to send in our funding recommendations, and sorry, have Will look at all those and evaluate the deviation, and if we're all lined up, that makes it a lot easier. If there's a spread, as Chandra was mentioning, then we probably have to do some more work. And I will also add in that, I look at the leaning yes as the ones that we should focus on with that discussion, and then the maybes as the, I don't want to rule them out. I'm just saying that we should, when we get done with that process, if we feel like we have more funding, if there's funding left over, that's when I would I would suggest we talk about the maybes, but that's just how I had maybe in my head.
All right, so Carol?
I just want to say something, maybe it doesn't need to be said, but is it understood that if people do their individual allocations, that $10 million is the total that they can allocate?
Absolutely.
Okay, I just wanted to say that out loud to make sure.
No, I appreciate that. You cannot send in a spreadsheet with more than $10 million. That is a large number. I would also say that if you don't want to fully fund somebody, that you have to state what you are willing to fund or how you came up with that number as a requirement. Because otherwise, we have nothing to have a conversation about, right? We just know, somebody says 50,000, somebody says 100,000, but nobody knows why. So, Chandra, did you want to add something?
I was going to say with the rationales, that's what I did do. I tried to look at their proposals, look at their budget requests, and choose things that, if I'm doing partial funding, what that partial funding would go towards. And I think it's good to put the rationale on the sheet, but also when we have conversations, I think people should be prepared to share their rationales too, and as part of the conversation. Because some of them I don't have rationales for. It's just, I don't know. You look at the thing, some of them, the program can still run without the full funding.
Well, that's your rationale. Your rationale is the program can
Okay.
continue to run with
I will
less
type
funding.
that in, because some I left blank, because it was okay, all right, thanks.
Grace?
I was just wondering if we set a goal time on this, like when
That
we're
was my
having our
next
next ARPA thing, or when to have these allocations in.
Okay, so it sounds to me like there's a mix. Some people have almost completed their spreadsheet with everything. Some people are close to being done. Some people maybe haven't started that process yet. So when should we have a deadline to give to Will, keeping in mind that Will's going to need time to pull all this information together for us to have the next conversation? So if
Keeping
we
in
make-
mind, we're gonna need time to do all that kind of stuff
So
too.
I'm just
So.
want to, these are the boundaries that I'm going to set for us. I think it would be great if we could actually have something in council that says we're going to give money in February with things. People can get the money. Working backwards, that gives us 3 weeks in January right now. And so, yeah, it's the 17th. Are there any proposals in terms of when this should be done? I mean, given people's schedules and so forth.
I mean, Will, how fast do you think you can put the information together? Like, if we said by Friday?
So
Could you
the
do it by-
spreadsheet with mean, median, min, max, and even the average adjusted for the standard deviation is already ready to go. So whenever you get it to me,
Can we say Monday? We'll
that's
send
right.
you the numbers.
So as soon as I can turn it around, one business day, and then get it. ready.
Thursday.
So, but
One
today is
business
Tuesday.
day. I know.
Not this Thursday.
Right, if it was Monday, maybe Thursday, but
Okay.
that would push us back a week, and
That
we'll,
will push us back a week.
Can I clarify, when you say one business day, like if we gave you things, they were in your inbox Monday morning, is it possible by council?
Yes.
Because,
Well, yeah, and the
Next
following one,
Monday.
if all the, using the same spreadsheet sent out, if all the allocations are in there, I can get it that day.
But in addition to that, we would need a list of the rationales that go with each one.
I can't do that.
Is that possible?
I can't do that.
In a very ugly format, yes.
It can be ugly.
Yeah.
It can be ugly.
So you're
Doesn't have to
saying
be
in a week?
color-coded with red. Okay, so what I'm hearing from people is if we get it by Monday morning at 8 a.m.,
No, you're not hearing that from me.
okay, send it on Sunday night, Will can then put together a spreadsheet that will include the descriptive statistics, and then we'll have the in not very pretty formatting, the rationales that people gave for if they were doing partial funding. That would be available for Monday night's council to have a conversation. And I would say that we should focus that conversation on ones that we were like, yes, everybody agrees we should give most of the money here, and let's just continue to whittle it down. So, is everybody good with that? Monday morning, 8 a.m.
I am not good with that, but I'm just gonna say that. I'm not good
Can you
with that.
send it on Sunday?
Huh? No. If I can't do it on Monday, what makes you think I'd send on Sunday? Duh. No. No. It's Tuesday,
Yeah.
okay? I'm not even gonna talk about the rest of the things that I have to do this week, including something for you.
I know.
So, I don't have that time. I'm making up for time I lost in December. Let me put it that way. So to rush me with that right now does not work for me. I'm just saying that.
Okay, so then the question is, what does work? What timeline does work?
You guys want to start distributing in February. We have a Monday off. And I would like to be able to have that discussion to be honest, at the beginning of February, instead of rushing to try to get it done in January. I can try, I'll put it this way, I can try to have these things, this stuff put in place, but I can't make any promises.
All right, so,
That's the best I can give you right now.
And it is 10:59.
and it's 10:59, so I guess we'll do a straw poll. That's the only thing I can do, right? We did a straw poll earlier. Okay, how many people want it to be due next Monday? All right, how many people don't? Okay, that's thing. Thank you very much. And with that, there's no further business before this council. I apologize, I did miss the council input and communications, but we are out of time tonight. Thank you.